It's 1944, and you're crammed into a cattle car, so tight you can barely breathe. The air is thick with sweat, piss, and the sour tang of fear. You've been on this train for days, hungry, thirsty, half dead already, when the doors finally screech open. A blast of cold air hits you, and then you hear it. Boots crunching on gravel, dogs barking like they're ready to rip you apart, and voices shouting in German, sharp and brutal. Schnell, schnell, faster, faster. You stumble out onto a platform, blinking against harsh floodlights, and there he is. A man in a black uniform, his face calm, almost handsome, like some twisted movie star. He's got white gloves on, pristine against the field around him, and he's smiling, just a little, like he's welcoming you to a party. But this ain't no party. This is Auschwitz-Birkenau, and that man, that's Josef Mengele, the angel of death, and he's about to turn your world into a living nightmare. You're herded into a line, shivering, clutching your mom's hand or your kid's tiny fingers, and Mengele's standing there, cool as ice, his stick pointing left or right. Left means the gas chambers, death in minutes. Your body burned to ash before the sun's fully up. Right means a camp, slavery, and maybe a slower death. But some of you, especially the kids, the twins, the ones who look different, catch his eye in a way that makes your stomach drop. He steps closer, his voice soft, almost kind. Twins? Are you twins? He asks, tilting his head. If you say yes, you're pulled aside, and that's when the real horror begins. Not the quick death of the gas, but something slower, something that'll make you wish you'd gone left. Let's paint the scene, because this is where it gets ugly, real ugly. Say you're one of those twins, a little girl, maybe 10 years old, clutching your brother's hand. Mengele's got you now, and he's not sending you to the barracks with the others. No, you're headed to his lab, a place that smells like bleach and blood, where the walls are stained with God knows what. He's got this glint in his eye, like a kid with a new toy, and he starts with the basics. Measuring your skull, your nose, your arms, scribbling notes like you're a science project. But it doesn't stop there. Oh no, that's just a warm-up. Next thing you know, he's got a syringe in his hand, and he's jabbing it into your eyeball, man, pumping in chemicals to see if he can turn your brown eyes blue. The pain's like fire exploding in your head, and you're screaming, but he just watches, calm as ever, jotting down how long it takes you to pass out. Or maybe he's stitching you to your brother, vein to vein, trying to make you share blood like some Frankenstein freak show. The needle digs in, no anesthetic, just raw agony as your skin tears and the thread pulls tight. If you're lucky, you die quick from infection. If not, he keeps going, cutting off your arm to see how you heal, injecting you with typhus to test some theory, or ripping out your organs while you're still awake, just to see what's inside. And when he's done, he tosses you aside like trash, moves on to the next kid, whistling a tune like it's all in a day's work. That's the kind of monster we're dealing with here. Not some random psycho with a knife. These were calculated, cold-blooded atrocities dressed up as science. Mengele didn't just kill. He played with his victims like they were dolls, breaking them apart piece by piece, all while smiling that creepy little smile. And the worst part? He got away with it for years, decades, even. But before we get to that, let's rewind. Who the hell was this guy? How does someone go from a regular kid to a walking nightmare? Let's dig into his story, step by step, and figure out what made this bastard tick. So, let's take it back to the beginning, March 16th, 1911, in a little town called Günzburg, Germany. Picture a sleepy Bavarian village, all quaint houses and rolling fields, the kind of place you'd see on a postcard. That's where Josef Mengele popped into the world, the oldest of 3 boys born to Karl and Walburga Mengele. His dad was a big deal around there, ran a farm machinery company called Karl Mengele and Sohn, which made him rich and respected. Little Joseph grew up with money, a nice house, and a mom who was strict as hell. Some say she ruled the family with an iron fist, maybe planting the first seeds of that cold control he'd show later. As a kid, Joseph wasn't some obvious creep. No torturing cats or setting fires, just a smart, quiet boy who liked science and music. He was good-looking, too, with dark hair and a charm that'd serve him well down the line. School was a breeze for him. He aced his classes and had this knack for biology that'd eventually twist into something sick. But back then, he was just a normal rich kid, soaking up the good life in Gunsberg, probably dreaming of big things. The world was shifting, though Germany was still licking its wounds from World War I, and resentment was brewing. That's the soil where Mengel's darkness started to take root. Fast forward to the 1920s, and Joseph's a teenager, heading off to university in Munich. This is where it gets interesting. Munich's a hotbed of Nazi ideas back then, and young Joseph's eating it up. He's studying philosophy at first, getting into the racial theories of guys like Alfred Rosenberg, stuff about Aryan superiority, and purifying the race. It's pseudoscience garbage, but to a kid like Mengele, ambitious and impressionable, it's gospel. He switches gears to medicine and anthropology at the University of Frankfurt, working under some big-name professors who are all about eugenics, the idea that you can improve humanity by weeding out the weak. Sound familiar? That's the Nazi playbook, and Mengele's already flipping through the pages. By 1931, he's deep in it, joins the Sturmabteilung, the Nazi Party's thug squad, and starts hanging out with hardcore racists. He's not just a student anymore, he's a believer. In 1934, he lands a gig at the Institute for Hereditary Biology and Racial Hygiene in Frankfurt, working under Ottmar von Verschuer, a guy obsessed with twins and genetics. Verschuer is like a mentor to him, and Mengele's eating up every word, writing papers on cleft palates and jawlines, legit stuff that gets him 2 doctorates by 1938. He's Dr. Josef Mengele now, MD and Ph.D., a rising star in the twisted world of Nazi science. That same year, he joins the SS, the elite Nazi crew, and you can almost hear the gears clicking into place. World War II kicks off in 1939, and Mengele's ready to roll. He's in the Waffen-SS, the armed wing of the SS, serving as a medical officer in France and Russia. Guy's a war hero for a minute, gets wounded in 1942 near Rostov-on-Don, earns some medals, the works. But he's too banged up for the front lines, so they send him back to Berlin. He hooks up with Verschuer again at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, diving deeper into twin research and eugenics. This is a turning point. War's raging. The Nazis are ramping up the Holocaust, and Mengele's itching for a bigger role. In May 1943, he gets it. Chief doctor at Auschwitz-Birkenau. That's when the mask comes off, and the monster steps out. All right, here's where it gets real dark, darker than dark. Auschwitz, 1943. Mengele rolls in like he owns a place, and in a way, he does. This isn't just a camp. It's a death factory, pumping out corpses faster than you can count. Trains pulling day and night, packed with Jews, Romani people, anyone the Nazis deem undesirable. Mengele's job? Play God. He's on the platform, that stick in his hand, deciding who's gassed and who's spared for now. But it's not random. Oh no, he's got a plan, and it's the stuff of nightmares. First off, the selections. Picture thousands of people, moms, dads, kids, stumbling off those trains, half dead from a journey. Mengele's there, all polished and calm, like he's picking fruit at a market. Left, gas chambers. Right, slave labor. But he's not just sorting, he's hunting. Twins, dwarfs, anyone with interesting traits. He pulls them aside with that creepy smile. Don't worry, he'll say to a terrified mom. I'll take care of your babies. And she believes him, because what choice does she have? Next thing you know, those kids are gone, whisked off to his lab, and she's headed to the gas. Now, let's talk about that lab, his playground. It's this grim little building in Birkenau, tucked away from the main camp, but you can hear the screams from miles off. Inside, it's a horror show. Tables stained with blood, jars of organs lining the shelves, tools that look more like torture devices than medical gear. Mengele's got a team, SS guards, prisoner assistants, but he's the star. He's obsessed with twins, see, because he thinks they're the key to cracking genetics, to building the perfect Aryan race. Verschuer's egging him on from Berlin, and Mengele's delivering big time. Take the twins' experiments, pure evil. He'd grab a pair, say 2 little boys, maybe 7 years old. First, it's all clinical, measuring their heads, their eyes, their hands, comparing every detail. Then the fun starts, his kind of fun. He'd inject one with typhus or tuberculosis, leave the other as a control, and watch how they died. If one croaked, he'd kill the other two, dissect them side by side, send the bits to Verschuer like a twisted care package. Sometimes he'd sew them together, literally stitch their arms or backs, try and make Siamese twins. No painkillers, just raw screams as the needle ripped through flesh. Most died from shock or infection, their little bodies rotting while he took notes. Then there's the eye stuff. Mengele had this thing for heterochromia, different colored eyes, thought it was some genetic gold mine. He'd take kids, pin them down, and shoot dye into their irises, methylene blue, chemicals that burn like acid. The pain was unreal. They'd thrash and cry till their voices gave out, but he'd just keep going, watching their eyes swell and bleed. Didn't work? No problem. He'd rip the eyes out, pin them to a board, ship them off for study. One survivor, a girl named Eva Moses Kaur. Talk about it later. How he'd charm the twins with candy one minute, then turn into a demon the next. And it wasn't just twins. Dwarfs, people with deformities. He'd cut them open alive, no anesthesia, pulling out organs to see how they ticked. He'd freeze prisoners in vats of ice water, timing how long till they died, or boil them to test heat endurance. Pregnant women? He'd strap their breasts shut after birth, watching the baby starve while mom went mad. One time, he tossed a newborn into an oven alive because it didn't fit his research. Another day, he gassed an entire barrack of sick women just to clear space, then dissected them for kicks. The numbers are staggering. Thousands dead at his hands, maybe tens of thousands if you count the selections. He'd kill with phenol injections straight to heart, quick and brutal, or let them linger in agony for days. And the whole time, he's whistling Mozart or humming some cheery tune, like he's at a picnic. Survivors said he'd show up at roll call in his fancy uniform, picking out the weak like a vulture, and they'd vanish gas, cut up, gone. It was a machine of death, and Mengele was the oil keeping it running smooth. So, what the hell was going on in his head? How does a guy with 2 doctorates, a wife, a kid, turn into this? Let's break it down, because this ain't just evil. It's evil with a purpose, or at least what he thought was one. Mengele wasn't a random sadist. He was a true believer. That Nazi ideology, Aryan supremacy, racial purity, it wasn't just talk to him. It was science, his religion, and he was its high priest. Psychologists have chewed on this for years. Some say it started with his mom. Wahlberger was a cold, controlling type, maybe taught him to shut off emotion early. Others point to war. Seeing death up close in Russia could have numbed him. Flipped a switch. But me? I think it's the eugenics. That idea he swallowed whole in school. He saw humans as lab rats, not people. Jews, Romani, the disabled, they weren't human to him. Just material for his grand experiment. One prisoner doctor who knew him said, in ordinary times, he'd have been a slightly sadistic professor. Auschwitz just gave him the keys to the candy store. He was meticulous, too, obsessed with order. Every murder, every cut, he'd write it down, send reports to Berlin like a good little soldier. But there's a disconnect. Survivors say he didn't enjoy the pain, not like a classic psycho. He'd watch a kid die and not blink, just note the time and move on. That's scarier, in a way. A sadist gets off on it. Mengele didn't care enough to feel anything. He was a machine, and his victims were just parts to tinker with. And the twins thing? That's straight from Verschuer. Decades of twin research Mengele twisted into a horror show. He thought he'd unlock the secrets of heredity. Crank out perfect Aryan babies for Hitler. Never mind that his science was bunk. Most of it was useless, even by Nazi standards. But he believed it, and that belief fueled the carnage. Add in the power. Auschwitz made him untouchable, a god in a white coat, and you got a recipe for hell. January 1945. The Red Army's closing in and Auschwitz is falling apart. Mengele grabs his notes, burns what he can't carry, and bolts. The camp's a mess, gas chambers blown up, bodies everywhere. But he slips through the cracks. He's captured by the Allies later that year. But here's the kicker. No SS tattoo. Most SS guys had won. Mengele didn't, so they let him go. Can you believe that? The angel of death walks free because of a damn tattoo. He hides out in Germany for a bit, working as a farmhand under a fake name. Joseph's a survivor. I'll give him that. By 49, he's got a Red Cross passport and he's off to Argentina, where Nazis are popping up like weeds. He's living good, marries his brother's widow, Martha. In 58, gets Paraguayan citizenship in 59. He's Josef Mengele now, charming the locals, running a carpentry business, acting like the past never happened. Meanwhile, survivors are screaming for justice and Mossad's hunting him, but he's always 2 steps ahead. The 60s get dicey. Eichmann's nabbed in 60 and Mengele spooked. He bounces to Paraguay, then Brazil, living in shacks and slums. Paranoia eating him alive. He's not the slick doctor anymore. Old, sick, jumping at shadows. In 77, his son Raul visits him in Sao Paulo, and Mengele's still delusional, claiming he never harmed anyone. Dude swimming in denial right up to the end. February 7, 1979, he's at a beach in Bertioga, Brazil, swimming under the alias Wolfgang Gerhard. Stroke hits, he drowns, and that's it. Game over. Buried as Gerhard, no fanfare, just a quiet end for a guy who caused so much noise. It's not till 85 that they dig him up, confirm it's him with dental records and DNA in 92. No trial, no noose, just a stroke and a splash. Survivors raged. The world shrugged. The angel of death flew away, and justice never caught up. So, here we are, March 13th, 2025, and Mengele's still a ghost in the room. His name's a shorthand for evil, a warning in history books, but it's more than that. Survivors like Eva Kor carried those scars till they died, physical, mental, soul deep. His research was trash, but stained science made us question how far we'll go in the name of knowledge. And his escape? That's a gut punch to anyone who believes in justice. Every detail I could scrape from English sources, spun into a story that's as real as it gets. Mengele wasn't a demon from hell. He was a man, and that's the scariest part. He walked among us, smiled, shook hands, and then turned into a butcher. So next time you hear his name, don't just shiver. Think about what made him, what let him loose, and what we got to do to make sure it never happens again. Sleep tight. Buddy, this one's going to linger.